Oh hi, this is ARC the Cartoon Master, and yep, it's another reaction video at my sister's place. Little Nelly here, just sleeping as per usual, and Louie I think is somewhere outside. And I think you might have seen this house in the last reaction video where I just entered that pickup shop sort of editor's note, letting you know that, oh yes, I did the Reese's Pieces testing video sometime after I recorded that bit, but yeah, this is my first time doing an actual like the actual main footage for the reaction video at this house. And yeah, this time it's going to be a short video because I'm going to be reacting to a shorter video so that, you know, it'll take less time to record, less time to edit, and I'll be able to get this out sooner. Because yeah, I'm actually currently working on another video where I walk to another location, and you're gonna love it when it comes out. Maybe not as much as the other one, but what can you do? And this time I'm reacting to a video that surprisingly not a lot of people have reacted to yet, so I thought I'd be the first to do so, and that being DisneyCember. Now what the frick is a DisneyCember, you might ask? Well, it's this thing that Doug Walker does, where every year in December he reviews a bunch of Disney movies, and he's been doing it since 2011. He does it as himself, not as a nostalgia critic. He does like a 2-3 minute video for each movie explaining his or sometimes even 10-minute. The point is he just gives his actual thoughts on the movie instead of playing a character, if that makes sense. And yeah, he's been doing it since 2011 when he did all the hand-drawn films. Then in 2012 he did the CGI films, including Pixar. Then in 2013 it was the live-action movies. 2014 he did Studio Ghibli, as well as a few others he never got around to. Then in 2015 it was Marvel and Star Wars and a few others. 2016 it was the direct-to-video films, mostly the sequels that no one likes. Then 2017 was Disney Channel Originals, and then in 2018 onwards he just decided to go by what was most requested, because every time he did a theme people would keep telling him he missed this and he missed that, so he just did all the popular demands at the end. But with that said, in 2020 he started reviewing TV shows, but only ones that had completely run their course for the most part. And then 2021 he started doing video games. Then 2022 he did Blue Sky films. Yeah, because, you know, Fox is owned by Disney now. But for now, let's start with the very first DisneyCember he ever did, all the way back in 2011. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Yeah, Dwarfs, because this is before J.R. Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings, where he used the plural form dwarves that caught on. But, so you might be wondering, what are my thoughts on Snow White? Well, this is one that surprisingly, this is one that I actually grew up with as a kid, because I had two sisters growing up, so naturally I was exposed to a lot of girly shows and movies growing up. We had Snow White and Cinderella on VHS, and they watched those fairies videos that we had in Australia, and they were into Barbie and Polly Pocket and stuff. And yeah, okay, so point is, growing up with sisters, naturally I was exposed to a lot of girly schlock, and I never went through that girls have cuties phase that a lot of boys do. Because to me, girls were just normal people who just happen to like different stuff and have different, you know. But yeah, it's weird, because I also grew up thinking it was girly to be into sports, or at least those sports that don't really put a lot of emphasis on strength as much, like tennis or soccer or what have you. Just because I personally happen to be a lazy slob who just sat inside playing on the computer all day. Well, I liked venturing out and exploring on the farm that we grew up on, but I was never really into sports as such. Yeah, because my personal experience dictates what every kid was like, am I right? But anyway, so about Snow White, so yeah, this is one that my sisters and I used to watch when we were younger, and yeah, I thought it was a decent movie, and it wasn't really one of my favourites, but it was one that I didn't mind putting on. And I thought Snow White was kind of cute, and I thought the dwarves were kind of funny. The Queen was really menacing villain. Gosh, you just really did not like Snow White, huh? And yeah, although I wasn't really scared of her hag form as such, it did sort of creep me out a little bit, if that makes sense. I don't know, I wasn't really... Could probably count on one hand the things that actually legitimately terrified me in media as a kid. But also, as a kid, I thought by fairest of them all, or fairest in the land or whatever, I thought that meant that Snow White was really kind and courteous to everyone, because at least nowadays, or even when I was a kid, nobody really uses the term fair to describe one's appearance. Like, yeah, they even made fun of that on Drunk Disney. Like, ooh, she's so fair. You're so fair. But yeah, it is... So it was funny growing up and realizing that the Queen was jealous of Snow White's good looks. The nerve. So, yeah, with all that done and said, let's, if you have any more questions on what I think of the movie, feel free to pop them in the comments, but for the time being, let's get into Doug's review that I'm reacting to. Yeah, that'll do, Peg. Okay, so, let's get on with this.
Oh, my tooth. I've maxed out my dental. Switch to AHM's Flexi Packages and you can choose how you use your included extras, like whole routine dental.
Thanks, Pod. Flexi Packages only available at ahm.com.au.
What a bizarro ad. Moving on.
So it's December, and I started thinking to myself, what kind of videos can I do this month?
Oh yeah, I should probably mention that his video got taken down for copyright a while ago, and so he had to put public domain music over the music from Dinosaur that he used. Actually, you know, I'm just going to watch my censored edit instead. Ah, here we go.
So it's December, and I started thinking to myself, what kind of videos can I do this month? Something wholesome, nice, and Christmas related. But then, the more I thought about it, I'm doing a lot of Christmas videos this month, as I do every month. And for whatever reason...
Whoa, we screwed up there. He does Christmas videos every month. Yeah, that one always bugged me even as a teenager when I first saw this. Back in like January of 2012. God, I have cousins who weren't even born yet. Yeah, he should have done a retake of that, but I guess he was really rushing to get this out ready for December.
And I started thinking about the Disney films, you know, the ones that we all grew up with. The more I was thinking about it, they're wholesome all the time. They don't wait 1 month a year to shine all the magic and goodness of humanity on us. They have to be whimsical all year round, and that can't be easy.
Yeah, something a lot of Disney movies nowadays struggle to capture, huh? Yeah, it's something I even worry about as an upcoming content creator. Like, will I manage to create something that'll touch people in the same way? Don't take that the wrong way, folks. Poor choice of words.
So I decided I'm just going to review all the Disney films. That is to say, all the animated 2D Disney films, with some exceptions.
Oh yeah, and keep in mind showing the censored edit, because to get around the... hang on. Yeah, so like I said, I'm showing the censored edit of this review because the version uploaded to Channel Awesome unfortunately has like 2 layers of completely different types of music on it because of copyright and all. But luckily my censored edit survived all these years. God, I did this back in 2013, only 2 years after the original review came out. That is insane. But we'll see if Doug's review itself doesn't have this problem, so probably won't. We'll see.
Why? Because I love Disney, and so do you. Oh, you may act like you don't like Disney. You may talk about how it's an evil corporate monster that only gets stronger and stronger the longer we live.
Yeah, see, when I saw this, God, I think I'd have only been 15 when I first saw this review back in January of 2012. And I didn't know what the frick Doug was talking about with Disney being a quote-unquote evil corporation. Like even when I first heard it in the Simpsons movie, back when I was like 10 or 11, yeah, for the record, it's rated PG here in Australia, so I was allowed to see it. You know, when Bart puts like some random lady's bra on his head and is like, I'm the mascot of an evil corporation! But, like, I thought that was just a completely random non sequitur because, like, I thought evil corporation meant, like, you know, something run by, like, supervillains trying to carry out their evil deeds. It did not sound like something that would happen in real life. Like, think more Do Think than Al-Qaeda, if that makes sense. Even though Phineas and Ferb wasn't out yet, but you know what I'm saying, like, these types of whatever, yeah, I didn't get what Doug was referring to. Like, I thought Disney was like this, you know, this wholesome company that actually cares about what people want. Yeah, and unfortunately Mulan 2020 kind of proved that wrong. Like, even back in 2012 when I heard that Disney bought out Star Wars, I did not see that as a bad sign, even though I should have. Instead I was like, oh wow, Star Wars becomes part of the Disney family, wow, how wholesome. Yeah, how foolish and naive of me. Yeah, moving on.
But the funny thing is, you don't have a choice. You can bombard us with all the genius, monstrous things that Disney has done in the past. You can argue debatable messages. You can argue debatable ethics. You can even argue debatable stereotypes. But it doesn't matter.
So it really doesn't matter. Okay, whatever. Yeah, it's another thing Disney has come under fire for, the ethnic stereotyping. Yeah, see, when I was a kid, I had no idea that... whatever, I'll get to it if we get to the Dumbo review, or Peter Pan, or friggin' Lady and the Tramp, or any of the other ones.
Disney has always been there. For most of us, it's the first thing we're introduced to.
Yeah, that's true for a lot of kids. But, yeah, it is weird that he included the clip of Pocahontas when he was talking about debatable stereotypes. I mean, yeah, the dude from Aladdin is somewhat understandable, but, like, again, I thought Pocahontas was trying to be a more, like, even though the movie itself wasn't that good in terms of, like, story and characters and stuff, it seemed like a decent enough portrayal of, you know, Native Americans, like, especially considering when it came out, long after the buffoons from Peter Pan. I think my only major complaint with that one is Pocahontas sort of looks Asian. Yeah, it's weird. Last reaction video I was complaining about Asian characters nowadays not looking Asian in the slightest, but with that said, back to Pocahontas, I don't know how a lot of Native Americans feel about that, so I'm not going to speak authoritatively on whether it's a good portrayal or not, but I thought it was decent enough for what they were going for. Just, yeah, I will say they did oversimplify the issue of, you know, why the English were colonizing what is now Virginia and, like, the Americas in general, and what they did to the natives. And sometimes I wonder, like, when is it okay to pull the "it's for kids" card? Because obviously kids are not as stupid as, like, shows like Barney treat them as, but at the same time, kids cannot understand stuff on the level that adults can. So it's a fine line you have to skirt. Like, explain it in a way that kids will understand, but don't insult their intelligence either. Like, when I was a kid, I had all sorts of children's encyclopedias that were sort of... they phrased the information they gave in a way that, you know, that's still formal and informative, but it's done in sort of easy to digest chunks that kids can absorb with their short attention spans, if that makes sense. Yeah, they're like, so point is, there is a way to explain this stuff to kids, like in a Disney movie, that in a way they can understand, and something tells me that's what they were trying to go for with Pocahontas, but they might have just missed the mark. But anyway, this video is supposed to be about Snow White, so let's just move on.
And that's the genius of Disney, putting all their time and all their effort not in something adult, but in something for children. And once something has your childhood by the it's never gonna leave you. It's there forever. Disney has practically become family to us. It's fairy tales, it's magic, it's everything that we enjoyed and thought was possible when we were younger. And as we grow older, there's a lot of other things to enjoy. The artistry, the creativity, the imagination. There's literally no other word for it but Disney. It's an artistic cultural phenomenon that'll never, ever leave.
Oh, thank God he didn't use the word phenomena as the plural form as a singular. I know, because I know a lot of people do that. Like, just because it does not end in an S doesn't mean it's singular. Yeah, he correctly used the singular form phenomenon, which is a Greek word. And like the O-N suffix becomes A, it becomes an A and pronounced A when it's plural. That's what a lot of people miss. Like, usually that plural ending, at least in English, is used for words ending in UM, the Latin equivalent. But anyway, on to what Doug is saying here. Yeah, that's pretty much how I feel about Disney. Like, I really dislike the company, but I like the art that they put out. Like, it's put out by the actual, like the writers and the animators. I don't really like the corporate executive side of the company. Yeah, that's similar to how I feel about just about every country in the world, including my own. I like the people, dislike the government, that sort of thing. I think that can apply to a lot of things in life. Like, you might, like, even your best friend, you know, you might like their personality, but you may not like their ideological choices. Like, yeah, you can be friends with an atheist if you're a Christian, just so long as you keep the religious debates to a minimum. But honestly, I find that as I get older, I get more cynical and jaded when it comes to big companies like Disney putting out this stuff. Like, for the longest time, I didn't have Disney Plus for that exact reason, because I didn't want to give them my money, but then again, I was still giving them my money by buying their physical media, because, yeah, that's totally not hypocritical at all. But yeah, like, eventually I got Disney Plus and my cousins were getting on to me for pirating media. But the first thing I decided to watch on Disney Plus when I got it was Amphibia, a show that was made by some guy just telling the story he wanted to, sort of loosely based on his own childhood, but adding in some, like, fantastical elements. Because fantasy doesn't always necessarily mean magic. It doesn't include that, obviously. It's just, that's what many people associate with the fantasy moniker nowadays. Yeah, he was literally just writing from the heart with some other people on the writing team to help him out. And I think the Owl House was the one that Disney canned for having a LGBT relations. I say that like I know nothing about the show yet. I've watched every episode that's out so far at the time of me recording this, but I don't know, I guess I just add little phrases like that. Oh, from what I've... Yeah, I think it was this, just because it sounds more natural that way, because that's how people talk, I guess. See, I just did it just then. I grew up saying I guess, just as a filler phrase, because that's how I always interpreted people saying it, I guess. And a lot of the times it would often garner reactions of, what do you mean you guess? What, you guess? Like, what do you mean you guess? I remember being so confused, because it's like, yeah, you know, that's just what people say. But, whatever. Let's move on here.
Now, I'm just going to state up front that I am directly ripping off Cinemassacre's Monster Madness, where James Rolfe reviews a new monster movie every day of October. I think it's a cool idea, and I wanted to do it with something I really enjoy. The hand-drawn animated Disney films.
Yeah, see, I like that idea of reviewing stuff in a row with an is it arching or arcing? Overarching theme to it? Honestly, I don't think it's something that James Rolfe or Cinemassacre or anything like that should own the rights to. It's a bit too vague a theme. Now, if Doug was specifically reviewing monster movies or horror movies for every day of October, yeah, I think that would be cause for alarm.
The only downside is there's only so many days in December and there's just a friggin' buttload of these movies. So I'm probably gonna do about 3 a day, and once or twice I may skip over one. But I'll do my best to comment on as many as possible. And keep in mind, this is just my own personal opinion. If you like or hate any of these films, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just putting out there what I think of some of the most beloved classics of all time. So, sit back and enjoy the month of what I like to call DisneyCember. Let's start off with the very first animated film ever made, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. We often associate the Disney formula with a princess in a big castle in some sort of far-off fairy tale. And even though not all the films are like that, in fact probably not even the majority, that's the one kids seem to like the most. And it started at the very beginning. Disney knew then that the more timeless you can make something, the longer it'll be around. So, logically, it makes sense to start off with a fairy tale.
Yeah, makes sense, I guess. Honestly, though, sometimes you simply can't avoid being a product of the times, as Doug himself will point out in just a sec here. Like, one example I can think of is the movie Home Alone, which is now owned by Disney. How funny is that? I think for the most part that movie is pretty timeless in terms of the themes of like family and Christmas and stuff, but there's a lot of people pointed out that the plot would have played out a lot differently if it were to take place today, and notably the sequels have tried to skirt around that by saying, oh, this kid can't access the internet because it's got... he can't contact his folks via the internet because there's a parental block thing on it. Honestly, I'm surprised most parents don't put that on their computer. That's totally something I would do, that I will probably do once I have kids, because I feel like kids just don't want to be kids anymore. I don't know, sometimes I worry about like how this will affect my works, because I kind of want to add pop culture references where it makes sense to. Like, I'm not going to do the whole, oh, let's just mention Jim Carrey because Jim Carrey exists. No, I'm not doing any of that schlock. But like, I'm doing it in a way that seems natural, like where people would do it in real life. Like, oh, the sister uses social media, so we're going to reference Snapchat and Instagram, but we're going to use like different names to sort of skirt around copyright and trademark laws and stuff, or oh, the older sister likes listening to Beyonce and Cardi B, and the younger sister prefers like Mozart and Beethoven and the Sherman Brothers and Georgia Mack, even though she's a little young to be listening to that. But yeah, it's just a matter of like, where do you draw the line between references that actually make sense in the context of the story and references that are just there because, haha, it's funny because that thing exists? Like in the Wizard of Oz, for example, there was originally meant to be a scene where Dorothy dances to the Jitterbug or whatever, because that was a popular dance when the movie came out. It was made at around the same time as Disney's Snow White and came out just 2 years later in 1939, with Snow White coming out in 1937. Wow, so my granddad would have only been 1 when this movie came out. That's how old it is. Of course, if you're watching this, you're probably a young'un whose grandparents weren't even born yet. But basically, they cut that scene from Wizard of Oz because it would have easily dated the film, and for some reason they kept in this one line of dialogue where Dorothy said she had a bug. And God, I bet that must have mystified audiences. Yeah, it's like in Roger Rabbit when Eddie comes out of the shower, because that was in reference to a scene that got cut, as was pointed out in the Nostalgia Critic review of that film. And there is also a similar problem where, like, I noticed in Turning Red, a movie that came out literally just last year, but is set 20 years prior in 2002. That takes me back. That was the year I first found out what year it was, because I was 5, turning 6 that year. But the main character in that movie is 13, so obviously, and the director was also 13 that year, so her difference is going to be different from mine, obviously. But anyway, in that movie, apparently they used some phrases that didn't exist at the time, like fur baby and, I can't remember, what else does it say on the TV tropes page that wasn't really used at the time? Like, I also noticed that, May twerks in one scene, even though that wasn't a thing yet, and there's a scene earlier in the movie where May, like, she's clearly supposed to be flossing, like the animator wanted to animate her flossing, but then director Domi Shi, or the animation director, whoever, must have pointed out, hey, flossing wasn't a thing in 2002, so they must have just edited it slightly, so it looks like flossing, but it's not flossing, if that makes sense. And she's basically does what I can best describe as lateral twerking, or sideways twerking, which isn't that much better temporally. And I'd argue it's a lot worse for a kid that age to do. What else did they say that wasn't accurate for 2002? Because I was like so close to having a similar problem with my comic, where there's a scene that's supposed to be set in the mid-90s, focusing on the main character's mum when she was a kid, and originally there was meant to be a scene where she says, "Okay, boomer," or "Okay, boomer," to her mum, which would have technically been correct, as her mum would have been a baby boomer. Like the mum's mum, like the main character's grandma would have been a baby boomer, being born in the 50s and all. Apparently the phrase "okay boomer" only came into existence in the past few years or so, which I should have known considering I only first heard it then, but here's the thing, present day past. Oh yeah, apparently the term "ride or die" didn't exist in 2002 either. But yeah, so basically I decided to change that line to "get with the times, grandma." Because yeah, I think kids have always sarcastically called their parents grandma, which is sort of how old they are. Like, it happened in Inside Out, for example. Riley calls her mum grandma, sort of tease her to get her into playing hockey against her, and also back in the old days when the baby boomers were the young hip generation, they used to say, "Oh, never trust anyone over 30." It might even date back to before the baby boomers, because there's always been that one elderly generation that bitched about, the kids these days, like back when The Simpsons was on and the baby boomers were only in like their 40s at most. It was the greatest generation being like that, you know, with Grandpa Simpson and of course Henry on Punky Brewster, and like even in the days of Gilbert and Sullivan, there was in Princess Ida, there was the character of King Gama, who he even has a whole song about how he prefers to have things to complain about because life is boring when everything's perfect. And he also has a song bragging about what a nice and humbled man he is, even though he's a goddamn prick. Yeah, let's just hope he doesn't burn down any cities anytime soon. But yeah, so going back to Snow White, I never even really thought of it as an old movie when I was a kid, because part of that could be because of how timeless it is, but also, like, even with something like Mary Poppins, where you can clearly tell it was not only made, but also set in an earlier time period, what with the kids not having TV or video games or anything. And even The Simpsons made fun of how, if Mary Poppins was set in present day, the umbrella would catch on the electrical wires in the street as she was gliding down. Yeah, I actually watched that episode recently, it was pretty funny, but like, even with that, I didn't realise how old it was, because I guess I just assumed, it's in colour, so it must have come out in like the 90s or something. Because I grew up thinking, if it's in, old stuff is in, like the past is in black and white. Oh yeah, kid me would have been blown away by how colourful everything was in the 70s. Yeah, I don't know, for me Snow White was just a cute little kids movie that I enjoyed, my sisters enjoyed. It didn't really show its age until, like, literally when I found out what year it came out, when I read about it in the, I can't remember what book it was. It was like the Oxford Illustrated Encyclopedia or something, specifically the article on Walt Disney. Frick, I can't remember. Whatever, if I can find it later, I'll edit it in post, as much as I was hoping not to do that. Moving on.
And as a first film goes, it's pretty impressive. I mean, okay, it's not entirely timeless. I mean, the designs are kind of 40s. Some of the characters aren't as developed as children's films are today.
Oh, he goofed up there. He said the designs are 40s, even though this movie came out in 1937. Though, you could argue that it's a compliment to the film, because it shows that even way back then, Disney was well ahead of their time in terms of animation. And said the characters aren't as developed as children's films today. Yeah, that is true, but it does also lead to a misconception that characters in general, especially female characters, weren't as well written back then. But I think that has more to do with the medium being really new at the time. The medium of film, and especially animated films, where film was just kind of seen as like a kitschy little niche little like experiment. Like if you're about my parents' age, like that, my parents are like late baby boomer, early Gen X, you'll probably remember that video games used to be much the same way when you were younger. Or if you're a kid watching this, I'm sure your grandparents will probably remember that when video games were basically just bips and bleeps and pixely stuff. They didn't really have much story or character, but nowadays they got a shit ton of that, and the graphics are really awesome, and they're really well developed in terms of story and character. Like, I think pretty much every medium, like every storytelling medium, goes through that stage, or at first it's just showing off that it exists and what can be done with it, and then progressively it gets more complex in terms of story and ideas. But like, yeah, just because the characters were not really well fleshed out in Snow White doesn't mean that was the case for characters in general at the time, because if you look at like theatre, for example, like the works of Shakespeare, their deep, complex story and characters, or even the silly comedies like the works of Gilbert and Sullivan, like I was actually shocked at how much character the female characters have in the Gilbert and Sullivan operas. Like, for example, Josephine in HMS Pinafore, which she's basically Rose from Titanic. She's in love with this lower class gent, but she's been being forced to marry this upper class twit by her snobbish parent. And then in the opera Patience, the main character is probably the first asexual female protagonist in anything ever, though I'm open to the idea that I could be wrong about that, but she's definitely the first one most people would probably hear about nowadays. Like, she's literally not interested in falling in love with the local, like, village boys, just like the local village maidens are. And then Princess Ida, that freaking badass mofo opened up a women's college before women were even allowed to vote. That is insane. But of course they also delved into some more misogynistic... I hate using that word because of how it's become associated with the woke left, labeling people they dislike, but like they did sort of delve into some sexist stereotypes, like the old lady who can't get with anyone, and by old lady I mean like middle-aged, like late 30s, early 40s in a lot of cases. Or I think Ruddigore had like, I don't know, Ruddigore was kind of weird because you have Rose Maybard, who's basically Bella from Twilight. She keeps switching boyfriends on a dime. And then you have Mad Margaret, who's sort of a stereotypical hysterical woman. I thought she was handled fine. I mean, feminists seem to like Pepper from Encanto, so who knows what they'll think of Mad Margaret. And I thought Dame Hannah was alright. But point is, because Snow White is probably the earliest piece of media that a lot of people nowadays have watched, they sort of use that as their basis for what storytelling in general was like, especially with regards to how the female characters are written. I swear I go through this for every reaction video. Like, literally the only one I didn't was probably the second one where I talk about cultural differences between America and Australia. But I don't know, it just seems to come up in my videos a lot. At least for the first one it made sense, because I was specifically responding to a video about feminist Disney ladies, but... Though I do regret my presentation in that video. I was just doing it in a really ranty way, if that makes sense. And yeah, like, I still stand by the points I made in that video, just not the way I went about it. I just came across as a stereotypical anti-woke reactionary, as opposed to something like the Cracked commentary, where because it was scripted I came across as much more composed, if that makes sense. Moving on.
And Snow White's singing voice is... very Betty Boopish.
Yeah, I always found that funny. She even kind of looks like Betty Boop, just a bit. I guess that was the style at the time. But yeah, as a kid, I didn't think of that as being quote-unquote old. Like, I just thought, oh, okay, Snow White's got a very interesting sounding voice, very cute and high-pitched. Wasn't really my thing, but I mean, it makes a little bit more sense when you realize the character's supposed to be 14. Seriously, she's only 14? Ugh, nowadays you have teenage girl characters who look about 10. Sort of swung in the other direction.
To describe the story is almost silly. We all know it. An evil queen wants to be the quote-unquote fairest of them all, but finds out that there's only one young woman in her way.
Yeah, I was always freaked out by... Hang on.
Queen.
Yeah, I was always freaked out by the queen's throne when I was a kid. I thought her freaking throne was scarier than Magic Mirror even. Just something about it kind of creeps me out. It sort of looked like some weird ancient Aztec artifact, like the logo for Montezuma's, which is a crap restaurant, by the way. 0 out of 5, 0 stars, in my opinion. They just microwave all their crap. Yeah, like, remember when microwave burritos showed up in Ratatouille as an example of capitalism taking over the food business? Just all about the money. Yeah, anyway, the Queen's Throne, I don't know. I did not even realize it was meant to be a peacock, and I loved peacocks as a kid. I thought they were kind of cute and handsome. Oh, okay, poor choice of words, but yeah, I thought peacocks were rather fascinating with the, with the tail feathers splaying out like that. And I think we even had a pet peacock on the farm at one point, but it flew away or something. And I think they have them at Cuddly Creek, the Gorge Wildlife Park, but I could be wrong on that. Yeah, I don't know, sometimes it's just still images that freak you out, like the cover of that Queen album, or that one face SpongeBob did in that one episode. Yeah, we all have our things that creep us out. Oh my god, I sound like such a moron right now, but as Bunthorne would say, here we are.
He wants to be the quote-unquote fairest of them all, but finds out that there's only one young woman in her way, the Princess Snow White. So she sends a hunter out to kill her, but the hunter is just so blown away by how hot she is, he can't do it.
Poor choice of words there, Doug. You know she's only 14, right? 14. You're 14! Here's a quote from the Cleveland show. Yeah, the scene, the scene, there were a lot of scary moments in this movie as a kid, but I guess it never reached the levels of the stuff that basically fueled my night terrors as a kid, but it was still pretty horrifying to see the stuff in this movie. But yeah, this bloody huntsman being forced to kill Snow White. Yeah, I'm totally with him on this one when he decides to drop the knife and decide he can't do it. If only Peter Pettigrew had that amount of courtesy. I don't know, like, Snow White's just so cute and pretty. There, that's how you phrase it, Doug, you sick creep. Yeah, he was literally only about to do it because the Queen ordered him to. Yeah, as a kid, I thought it was funny the way he got around that. Not telling Snow White to go into the scary-ass forest, that bit scared the frick out of me as a kid as well, but like, the way he lies about it to the Queen, I always thought was pretty funny. Even though it was supposed to be a dramatic moment. He apparently slaughtered a pig and gave the pig's heart to her in that little chest thing. Holy shit, I wonder if that pun was intentional, like, bringing her, that he was supposed to bring her Snow White's heart, like, inside a little chest. Also, was there any way for him to prove that that was in fact Snow White's heart? Like he actually thought that it should be fooled by a pig's heart until the mirror informed her otherwise. Yeah, and yeah, she was fooled at first until the mirror informed her, is what I meant to say. But yeah, like, DNA testing wasn't even a thing when the movie was made, let alone when it was set. So, and apparently a pig's heart does look an awful lot like a human heart from what I've heard. But I'm not going to show any images because I know people get squeamish about that. That is insane. Okay, yeah, it does look a little different. The pig's heart does look more like what we would call a love heart. And apparently the term love heart is only used in Australia, or at least it's not used in America. I guess they just call it heart symbol in America. And they have a go at us for sounding overly technical with the bloody metric system. Saying, oh, only scientists use centimeters and millimeters, but... and yet they freaking call a love heart a heart symbol, because that's totally not overly technical. Yeah, I only found that out from some person who was confused by all the terminologies on the show Bluey, because for a lot of Americans, that's like their only exposure to Australian culture, because like even back in the 90s, not a lot of them would have watched Blinky Bill, even though it did air over there, and not a lot of them watched Summer Heights High or Angry Boys or any of Chris Lilly's other stuff. And sadly, a lot of them did find out about Pixel Pinky from Mr. Enter's review of that show, and good God, they thought that was the kind of stuff we were exposed to on a daily basis, when in reality it's more along the same lines as like Spliced or Almost Naked Animals, or it was one of those shows that only aired like during like daytime on weekdays, so the only way kids would have watched is when they stayed home sick. Frick, where was I going with this?
Zoe tells her to run away and she comes across a cottage filled with 7 dwarves, which for me as a kid always raised a lot of questions. Are the dwarves related? Are they brothers?
Yes, I'm pretty sure they're supposed to be brothers, but yeah, that's okay. I never got it as a kid either. Just assumed they were like roomies or something. Before I even knew what that was, it was only really from watching Monsters, Inc. that I learned about the concept of roommates. Just like two guys living with each other, even though they're not partners in that sense, which I didn't even know that was a thing at the time because it was a different time. But yeah, I remember wondering why the dwarves lived together as a kid. But yes, apparently they are brothers, according to supplementary materials on the film. It must probably said it in some book somewhere.
Did they all just meet at random? If so, is there a place where dwarves just usually meet?
I mean, that last one isn't too far-fetched, because even if they weren't related, like they work at the same place. They all work in the mine. Also, is it me, or did they literally just reuse the same eyes for happy and, I think, bashful in this shot? Yeah, I mean, they're already pushing the boundaries of what can be done with animation with this film, so they had to cut costs somewhere.
Well, I'm overanalyzing. The Queen finds out that Snow White is still alive and puts on a disguise to try and kill her. Kinda strange that she wouldn't just send a henchman or somebody else to.
Oh yeah, so you should also probably point out that when the Queen, while in her hag form, when she's making the poison apple, at one point the drops of the potion sort of turn into that. They sort of form like a skull shape on the apple, which, as a kid, I did not know that was supposed to be scary. I just thought it was just kind of a weird thing to focus on. Same with that weird zoom-in shot of Sid's skull t-shirt in the original Toy Story. I did not know that was meant to be scary because, yeah, my introduction to skulls and skeletons and that was actually through this Human Body CD-ROM game I had as a kid, where it was like a lot of CD-ROM games, it had like this sort of mascot character hosting it, and in this case it was just a skeleton with eyeballs and other internal organs, named Seymour Skinless, which I only later realised as an adult that name was such an obvious reference to Seymour Skinner from The Simpsons. But apparently this character's called Seymour because you can see more of what's inside him. It even says that in the tie-in book that I also read as a kid. But yeah, because that was my introduction to skeletons as a kid, and his design is pretty friendly looking, like when compared to the skeletons in Coco, which were also not meant to be scary, but apparently they did scare a lot of people when that movie came out because it's like, who the fuck puts eyeballs on skeletons? It looks freaky. But I think the difference there is that their eyeballs are sort of like sunken into their eye sockets, giving that sort of Tim Curry look. Whereas Seymour, his eyes are just like these plain simple ovals taking up the whole socket. So I think more Matthew Broderick or Paul McCartney, if that makes sense. Well, it's funny because like that Human Body book I read as a kid even freaking said that on one page, or the page about the skeleton, that you probably might remember skeletons from horror movies and on pirate flags and stuff, but you should be scared of something that does so many important jobs. Like, it even acknowledged that, and I was miffed by it. Like, why are people scared of skeletons? It makes no sense. Even It was only when it was later explained to me on the Ali G show, like some scientist guy that he had on the show in one episode, he was saying, oh, you know, like we associate skeletons with death because the bones are the last thing to go. They rot away the slowest. Which, fun fact, that's also why the colour white is associated with death in Chinese culture. Hence why Lord Shen in Kung Fu Panda 2 is now Beano Peacock, because they associate white with like bones. It should also explain why bridal dresses are not white in their culture. Well, that and because they hadn't come into contact with Europeans yet. Yeah, it's weird. The freaking stuff that did and didn't scare me as a kid that apparently is the opposite for most kids. And in case you're wondering, yes, that was the same book that explained how sex works and how I learned about sex as a kid that I mentioned in the previous reaction. In case you were wondering.
Does she only have just the one? But again, overanalyzing. The film is about as basic children's movie as you...
Oh yeah, and I should probably also mention here that, wait, hang on, my friend's home. Oh, Liam's home. Ugh. Just like last time.
You can get. It's very bright, it's very colorful.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention, her face here. But anyway, Doug here was saying how, yeah, he was pointing out that apparently it's weird that, the Queen didn't just, wondering why the Queen didn't have any other plans to do it. Well, apparently she did in the original fairy tale, but it was cut, you know, like for the movie, those were cut down for time reasons, which also helped to make Snow White look less stupid than she was in the original fairy tale. Like, why does she keep falling for the same trick over and over? Well, different tricks, but in the same basic context, you know? And apparently, in the original fairy tale, this plan with the apple was the last one that she tried that ended up working, so that's one the folks at Disney decided to go with.
The film is about as basic children's movie as you can get. It's very bright, it's very colorful, but it doesn't try to insult the audience intelligence either.
Yeah, like what I was saying about the children's encyclopedias I had as a kid. God, that is a weird comparison, but like, yeah, I was also explaining, like, in the context of the Disney movies in general, like with Pocahontas from earlier, earlier in this reaction, where, you know, it was trying to give a more respectful portrayal of the Native Americans in a way that kids, both native and non, will understand.
As Disney princesses go, Snow White is probably one of the weaker ones, as she is sort of just bland and general nice. But on the outside, she is generally nice. There's nothing really wrong with her, she's just not particularly interesting.
Yeah, time... Oh, God damn it, Louie. Louie! Is someone else here? Okay. So yeah, now we come to the cow elephant in the room. Oh, I don't mean that as an insult. I mean, like, that's literally what female elephants are called, like cows. Like, whenever I use the phrase elephant in the room, I try to put some spin on it. Like, I believe in my Buzz on Maggie review, it was the wetter in the room, because, you know, they're those insects that are like the size of carrots. Does it count if the joke is explained in a different video? Well, anyway, so... Yeah, I know a lot of feminists really hate Snow White because she's just waiting around for a man to rescue her when... Like, come on, she's literally looking after 7 man-children, as one person commenting on Doug's review pointed out. Like, that takes... Well, they use the word balls, but... yeah, that takes ovaries, man. That takes gonads. And yes, the term gonads is gender neutral. Even though nads is only used for the male variant for some reason. Probably because it's more relevant in people's daily lives. For reasons rather unfortunate. But again, like, maybe if you don't want your daughters looking up to Snow White as a role model, which... Yeah, I mean, I personally think she's a good role model for young girls. She's very kind and supportive, but like, if you're one of those people who disagrees on that front, maybe don't show your kids Snow White. And not to mention, contrary to even what the anti-feminists will tell you, there did exist well-written female characters back then. Again, like Gilbert and Sullivan, they had a freaking asexual female character, and another one who founded a women's college, even though the opera didn't exactly side with her on that one, but whatevs. You know, it's still there at least. That they're showing that women are even capable of that stuff. I don't know, just put on Daria or something, you know?
To be fair, though, she's a lot more engaging than the prince, who only gets about 3 lines, and most of them are just sung.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Like, the prince is literally just a love interest for Snow White to fall in love with. And like, people claim Turning Red was the first to do that, when even if you want to discount Snow White because, oh, you know, it wasn't lust-based, she wasn't like getting thirsty over him, she was just doing what was expected for women. Well, freaking Little Mermaid was doing it. Hang on. 2022 minus 1989. Yeah. Freaking Little Mermaid was doing it 33 years before Turning Red. And that was much in the same vein as May gawking over Devon or Carter or Robert or whoever. Where Ariel was just looking at the statue of Eric being like, oh yeah, he's fine and all that stuff. Yeah, like whenever there's a movie with a male protagonist has a female love interest, feminists take issue at it because, oh, it's just reducing women to just being prizes to be won, or they're just something that exists as a satellite to a man. But if it's the other way around, they still frame that as being sexist against women because it's implying they need a man to exist. And it's like, God, you and your double standards, man.
The Dwarfs, of course, is what everybody remembers. The different personalities, the different ways they're drawn, the fact that their emotional status also happens to be their names. That's what the kids enjoy.
Yeah, Dopey was always mine and my younger sister's favourite when we were younger. It's pretty cute. Well, he kind of looks like Bing Crosby a bit, I swear. I mean, given when it was made, that might have been intentional, who knows?
Adults can enjoy the artistry a little bit more. Not just the bright colors and pretty background, but also some of the scary images they have. While the story itself is not...
Oh god, I swear this scene here is really scary. Like, even gives me the willies as an adult because, I think it's the music. The music really sells this scene. I can only imagine how frightening it would have been, especially for kids when the movie came out, and animated films weren't really a thing aside from this. Yeah. And maybe a few others from some other countries, but whatevs.
Especially dark, it was pretty to throw in some of this really creepy imagery.
Oh, and also the Queen transformation. That freaks me out as a kid. I was wondering if she even meant to do that because she was reacting to it like with such dread. I was like, why did you do this to yourself?
The Queen as a villain, when you really analyze it, is a pretty boring...
Also, I swear she's related to Ming from Turning Red. Like, Ming is basically what happened if you put this woman's face on Mary Poppins, I swear. Causing her to act like Mr. Banks, I don't know. Yeah, my analogies are weird.
Villain. She doesn't say much, she doesn't do much. Just a really vain woman is nothing really that fascinating in a kid's film.
Yeah, I don't want to say Gilbert and Sullivan did it better for the 10 trillionth time, but yeah, Gilbert and Sullivan kind of did it better.
But what keeps her pretty enjoyable, again, is the animation. She's just drawn great.
I mean, I guess it's not wrong that she's animated well, but I think, like a lot of people, he's misusing the term animation here because, well, have a listen.
I mean, she has this permanent frown on her face. I'm trying to think if I ever saw her smile in the film.
Yeah, he's using the term animation to refer to the character's design, which admittedly is a bit more relevant in 2D animation than it is in 3D animation, which sadly a lot of people misuse the term for, but because at least with 2D animation you're redrawing the character over and over, so I guess it is related to that in that sense, but even there, her being animated well has jack all, or at least not that much to do with like how she's designed. Like when you look at that infamous animated short Paddy the Pelican, for example, the character designs now are pretty decent. Not the best I've seen, but they look pretty good. But like they would look decent in a comic strip, but because the animation in that is so bad, just recycling the same frames over and over, it really doesn't help sell those designs. Again, that's sort of why I'm trying to get my Adele character done as a comic first, and then maybe adapt it as an animated series later when I've already gained some experience in the industry. But without him, because I also want the original version that I can own the rights. Basically, I'm trying to use the same model that Luke Pearson did for Hilda, where he did it as a comic book first and then later it's an animated series. I don't know how much heavily involved he is in that show. I know he does the title cards and he voiced like some random shop worker in one episode, but yeah, because I did that one animated short about Adele because I wanted to have something to enter into the film festival with the character, but I just did not have the time or budget or resources to do something really that spectacular. So it was just the single shot of her barely animated playing her violin. Like legit, one person even when I showed it to even reacted, "What? That's it?" So all this to say that animation and character design are two different things. Like you can be good in one thing but not the other.
And of course, the design of her after the transformation is just awesome. It used to scare the out of me when I was a kid.
Hey, get your fat ass. Get your fat ass back here. You like popsicles? Oh, hey there, Chris, you little sexy boy. that's who her design reminds me of. And granted, it could just be because of the Family Guy episode where they parodied Disney and they... But, like, I don't know, it just... I swear they look kind of similar, don't they? Also, they both kind of look like Doofenshmirtz just a bit. Ah, Perry the Platypus! What an unexpected surprise! And by surprise, I mean, you eat my poison applinators, so I can be the fattest in the tri-state area. Yeah, I suck at the voice, like. And oh yeah, going on to the topic of the skulls from earlier, yeah, this shot here of the crow or raven, whatever that is, going into the skull and peeping through the eye sockets, the orbits. Yes, I know there's a difference between orbit and an eye socket. The orbit is the bone, the ring bone around the eye socket. Yeah, I was not scared of that as a kid either. I just thought it looked kind of weird and kind of cool and a little bit funny, but like, yeah, like I said, I was used to seeing a skull/skeleton with eyes from that educational anatomy franchise. Because logic. Because I had a very weird childhood growing up.
But in general, does Snow White hold up as a film, even if you emotionally disconnected from the fact that you saw it when you were a child? Well, the key word there is emotion. Much like The Wizard of Oz or even Where the Wild Things Are, this is a film that is entirely fueled on emotion. Logic plays very little part in it. And to be honest, I find films like that very fascinating. They don't give you what you logically or ethically want to see, they give you what your emotions want to see. Like the prince comes, kisses her, and they ride off into the castle. Well, okay, how did he find her? Where did he come from? Did they ever have a conversation in the movie? Does it make sense that they would ride off together?
Something tells me that I don't think present-day Doug Walker would, Wait, hang on, let's just...
Of course not, but that's not what your emotions want to see.
Yeah, I don't think present-day Doug Walker would have these opinions on the movie nowadays. Yeah, he'd probably be like, oh yeah, you'd get cancelled for that nowadays. Like, because like, even back then he had a bit of a woke streak, but it wasn't quite as bad as it is now. Granted, some of it might be justified, like in the original December, when he gets around to reviewing Peter Pan, he actually kind of sort of borderline defends the Native American stereotypes in that movie, whereas like in one of his more recent Nostalgia Critic reviews, he panned it hard, and arguably rightfully so. Personally, I think it's pretty bad, but like, how did I put up with it as a kid? How did my mum put up with it as a kid? And how did my sister put up with it as a kid, considering she probably watched the movie more than I did? But yeah, that's one of those examples I would argue that Doug becoming more woke worked in his favor, but... And arguably this as well, but like with Snow White, it kind of has a bit more of an excuse because, like he said in this review, you know, it's just a fairy tale. It's not supposed to be realistic. It's just supposed to be just a fun little escape from reality. Like, I feel like 50 years from now, people might be saying the same about Encanto. Like they might be saying, oh, it's not realistic how... Like, people are already saying it's not realistic how a Latina grandma would be so easily forgiving. I don't know. Was that something that shouldn't have been spoiled? Or is it like another Darth Vader's Luke's father situation where, you know, everyone knows the twist by now? Because... I remember when Frozen came out, I didn't want to blab to people that Hans was the villain, but like that one pretty quickly took off as one of those Rosebud was his sled moments where literally everyone knows the twist. And my friend Al actually commented on my Buzz on Magoo review where I brought up the fact that Fiona from Shrek is an ogre now, and I was like, come on, it's not a spoiler, everyone knows about it, and I list off a bunch of other spoilers, you know, the Star Wars, Frozen, and Citizen Kane examples I just brought up. Yeah, he actually pointed out that in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, like, even the fact that Jekyll and Hyde are the same person was originally a twist at the end of that book, but yeah, because not a lot of people have read the book nowadays, but because it's been, like, memed through pop culture. Keep in mind the word meme has been around... I don't know if it's been around longer than the internet, but I know it doesn't exclusively refer to internet memes, but like I said, it's been memed through pop culture to hell and back, so now literally everyone knows that Jekyll and Hyde are the same person. Like, even when you first hear about Jekyll and Hyde for the first time, like, the first thing people mention to you about it is the twist that was originally a spoiler, that, you know, that they're the same person. All this to say, is it a spoiler to say that Abuela comes around at the end of Encanto? I feel like a lot of people, or at least a lot of Disney fans, would know that now. I mean, it's a Disney movie, of course it's going to end well. Like, even with some of their darker films, like Hunchback or Pinocchio, it's... Yeah, okay, maybe not so much Pinocchio, but like Hunchback and... Fox and the Hound and like those kind of Disney movies where it gets really dark. Even then, it's more of a Bart gets an F situation where, you know, there's always a silver lining. Things always turn up in the end. I think in hindsight, they were sort of piggybacking off of Don Bluth's ideology of, you know, kids can handle anything as long as you tack on a happy... not really tack on, but as long as you give them a happy ending in the end. Which I think he borrowed from, like, old school Disney. So it's sort of animated inbreeding, I guess. It was a term coined by a nostalgia critic in his review of Thief and the Cobbler, which, yeah, that wasn't Don Bluth, that was Richard Williams, and which in the years up to his passing, he didn't like to talk about it. It's an old shame of his.
They want to see the happiest of endings after the saddest and darkest of moments. Oh, yeah, don't think this scene didn't me up. You can keep Bambi's mom, you can keep Simba's dad. This is the scene that rips me to shreds. Why? Because it's like a wake. Literally down to the organ music. How much more depressing can you get?
Oh boy. It's gonna be a sad day when I come around to relating to this scene fully, but like, it's still a pretty sad scene, because even if I can't, because even though I haven't been to a funeral myself, though I inevitably will have to someday, if I'm lucky, I have lost people, well, more so pets, close to me, and I remember when my cat Missy died, I was really distraught about it. I can't remember if I went through all 5 stages of grief, but I went through a lot of them, as well as my elderly neighbour and Okay, I wasn't that sad. Actually, I was pretty torn up about that one, but I didn't get to go to the funeral for some reason. And also, the death of Robin Williams. Like, you're not going to relate to that if you're a kid now, but back when that happened, if you were there at the time and old enough to comprehend it and know who freaking Robin Williams was, oh man, that's probably the only time I ever felt genuinely distraught by a celebrity death. Whereas most celebrity deaths, if, like, even granting that they were probably a good person in real life, you more felt sad for them in the same way you feel sad knowing that that neighbor you rarely saw or the guy working at the convenience store passed away. Like, oh yeah, that's kind of sad, but like you kind of get over it pretty quickly. But with Robin Williams, I don't know, it almost felt like I knew him in a sense. Like that. Like, I literally remember the day that I was coming downstairs to empty the stuff from the bathroom bin, and Mum was saying, "Oh, this is sad. Robin Williams died. You know, the famous comedian." And I was like in shock. Like, what? And then later, I came back up to my room, and I was like, "Yeah, someday that's going to be someone I actually know, and I'm going to be even more torn up about it." Like, I can't believe I actually felt sad over Robin Williams dying. I didn't even know the man. Like, that's going to be me someday. It's okay, just some random passers-by. But yeah, even this scene in Snow White is a pretty sad one for me to get through. Like, I remember as a kid, I was like, I didn't get it, but I also kind of got it. Like, Snow White died, so obviously the dwarfs are sad about it, but I didn't know what a funeral was at the time. I think I learned about the concept of funerals from like, there's this book about these kids who are mourning the death of their cat Fred, and like, and like all the neighborhood cats are holding a funeral for him. I think the two kids joined as well, because it's like there was this one cat who could talk to them for some reason. I can't remember if it was established that the rest of the cats could talk with the kid, but basically that book was my introduction to the concept of a funeral as a kid. But back to this movie, nowadays I try to think of this scene whenever I'm whenever I'm out in public and I'm laughing to myself about something funny that I'm thinking about. When I realize what I'm doing, I try to think of this scene to get me to get a straight face, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I used to think of the death of my pet cat, but that sort of became like an in-joke within my family. Hope the same doesn't happen with this. It's kind of on the verge of that, but yeah, at least we still have the ending of Dot and the Kangaroo to fall back on. God, that movie. Yeah, I'm sorry, Tennille and Whitney. I know you hate that movie, and I'll admit the sequels aren't as good, but I really like Dot and the Kangaroo. It's a cute little movie to put on for your kids, or like even as an adult, even though there's not really in it for adults, I enjoy the really chill atmosphere of it. You know, aside from that tearjerker of an ending, even though literally no one dies except for this one dingo character who dies like a Disney villain. Like, you know, Dot safely gets back home, Kangaroo goes off into the wild, but, you know, the Dot's like 5. Of course she's gonna be sad and teary-eyed that her kangaroo friend has gone. She doesn't understand that wild animals are wild, even when the other animals try to explain it to her. And likewise, the animals probably don't get that humans age slower. God damn it, why is it that every time I do a reaction video I go off on all these weird tangents? I like providing a bit of background info on my experience with these movies, with the stuff that I'm reacting to. Sometimes I end up going on a mental wiki walk. Like, you know, in a show, whenever a character does some bullshit deduction skills that no reasonable person would come to, like, oh, I got a phone here. Phones are used to making calls. Calls are the sounds that animals make, and animals are really dumb, and dumb people do stupid things, and this is a stupid thing to be reacting to this video, so I shouldn't be reacting to it. Like, that's not how people come to these conclusions in real life. And yeah, there was an episode of South Park where they took the piss out of that, where the dude suddenly mentioned some random thing that had nothing to do with anything, and then somehow we worked its way back to the thing that was just mentioned. And I like that you mentioned Punky Brewster, because that was, yeah, you know me, I really like that show, Punky Brewster, and that was technically the first time I ever heard about that show, in that episode of South Park, but I had no idea what the show was about. I wasn't really given enough info to be interested in watching it. Ironically, I gained interest in watching that show from Nostalgia Critic mentioning it in a more disparaging light, making fun of her fashion sense. So he's kind of did a Barbara Streisand there.
The dwarves aren't just crying, they are sobbing, bawling over the fact that they've lost the only woman that's ever come into their lives.
Aside from their mum, I would hope. I'm assuming she's already passed on, considering how old the dwarves appear to be, despite being mentally children. Now, even Dopey, I'm assuming, is a grown man, considering he has a grown man's voice. And, like, because he doesn't talk, but he, like, screams in terror when he sees Snow White for the first time under the bed sheets, thinking she's a ghost. That's the dead giveaway, he's a grown-ass man. Yeah, who knows? Maybe they never even met their mother either. Maybe she, like Snow White's mum, might have died giving birth to Dopey. I'm guessing Dopey's the youngest.
So of course as a young boy, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm tough, it's just a cartoon. It ain't gonna leave an impact on me. Oh no, not Grumpy. Not Grumpy, no, he was the tough one. Not Grumpy, no, there's no hope for humanity! But that's just how the film works.
Oh yeah, I should probably point out that, once again, we're watching the censored edit, and there was a bit, yeah, right here, in the original, he says, just slit your throat now, there's no point in living, but yeah, I cut it because it was a suicide reference in a context where I didn't think it was necessarily called for. But yeah, I like how Doug was bringing up how, you know, when you're a young boy, you don't really feel like crying at this stuff, but yeah, I didn't get it when I was a young boy either, but with that said, I was more so exposed to my mum watching these sad movies than I was my sisters. I don't even recall my sisters crying at this scene in particular, maybe because they had that mindset that, oh, it's just a cartoon, it doesn't matter, but yeah, because I was mainly exposed to my mum crying at these sort of sad movies, more grown-up ones, I can't assume it was just me being a dumb little kid not getting it. How naive I was.
It did well to help kids emotionally connect with things that we weren't often used to connecting with. And sure, she comes back to life, they live happily ever after, but we didn't know that. Even if we did, this is still a pretty sad thing to go through. For a little kid, this was pretty heavy. So, apart from it just being groundbreaking as the first animated film, I think actually it does hold up for little kids, and I'd even argue adults. Is it complex? No. Is it engaging? No. But its emotional simplicity does manage to tap into the audience, to a point where we're not even questioning the obvious logical problems that are just staring us in the face. Creating a world for us where happily ever after is okay to believe in.
Ah, that explains it. It was a montage by some other YouTuber who may or may not still be up. It was just unfortunate that he was talking about the debatable stereotypes when I guess it would have been more fitting from the guy from Aladdin who appeared at that moment, but not necessarily, maybe kind of, sort of, Pocahontas in the next shot, but like I said, she is far from the worst depiction of a Native American that I've seen in a Disney film. Even if her design does kind of have the same problem as say, Tiger Lily from Peter Pan, or like a lot of like the Asian characters nowadays. Aside from Molly McGee, of course. I think her design is pretty well done for an Asian character. Still not sure about May, though. She kind of looks Asian, she kind of doesn't, and of course she has even less of an excuse than Marinette because both her parents are Chinese. But at the very least, she does look more Chinese than Marinette, which makes sense, so that's a plus. But, so, in terms of Doug's review of Snow White, I thought it was pretty well done. Didn't have any of the issues a lot of his later DisneyCembers have, where he just kind of glosses over where he kind of gets a lot of details wrong about the plot and characters, or he doesn't know what the frick he's talking about or any of that stuff. He just sort of tells it pretty much as it is, I guess. He gets all the stuff, all the info right. Maybe he didn't do as much research as he should have, because even though he didn't really get anything wrong about the movie, it would have been interesting to hear some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, but yeah, that's why we have Animation Pilgrimage. Yeah, I would strongly recommend you watch Tennille Flowers' Animation Pilgrimage series. They actually have a lot to say about Snow White in particular, and how, you know, a lot of the crap people say about Disney princesses and Snow White in particular is completely wrong. Like, she doesn't just sing and animals magically appear. No, the animals already came to comfort her, and she sang to like this random little birdie or whatever, and like how she actually has something of a character outside of just being a stereotypical princess, and that's actually saying a lot, considering like half of that series is about complaining about problematic films from back in the day that no one remembers, probably for that exact reason. Like whether, depicting like being all racist and sexist and sometimes even homophobic, even though that wasn't really an issue in those days. Like even less so than the racist and sexist stuff was, because nobody really, most people didn't really know what being gay was up until like the 80s and 90s, and it wasn't really until the 2010s when they started to gain equal rights, or I think some place in the 2000s allowed gay marriage, but even at that time it was seen as like something special for that state or country to brag about, like, oh, look at us, we have gay marriage, look how non-homophobic we are. But nowadays, at least in the Western world, it's completely normal for gays to get married literally anywhere in the Western world. Still heavily illegal in a lot of countries in other parts of the world, unfortunately, but it's getting better. But yeah, like I said, it's a good sign when Tennille Flowers defends Snow White. So yeah, I like how, at the very least, 2011 Doug seems to have a lot of good things to say about Snow White, and I remember agreeing with him even back then, because like I said, I grew up with this movie. I thought it was pretty good. I didn't see anything sexist in the movie as a kid. I didn't get any sort of sexist messages, though whether or not any young girls watching it, including my sisters, did when they were younger, will get any sexist messages from this is anyone's guess. It depends on the person, depends how they're raised. There's all sorts of factors going into it. I mean, for one thing, my family was never really devoutly religious, so that could explain why my sisters didn't grow up thinking they had to revolve their whole lives around getting married to a man. Yeah, I say that even though my sister's getting married, my older sister's getting married this year. And I'm actually over here. Came over here this time to get a suit fitted, but apparently I have to do that in Adelaide, back in my hometown of Adelaide, but we were sort of seeing what colour would look good on me. And it's got to be linen, because she's getting married in Bali, and we want to wear something light, so we don't get hot and sweaty. But yeah, even still, she's not doing it because she needs a man. She's doing it because she wants a man. I've been saying this all the way back in 2017. There's a difference between needing a man and... No, 2016 even before the cracked commentary, I was arguing with that, there's a difference between needing a man and wanting a man. And that's actually something that briefly comes up in my Adele comic, because in the first issue, she's trying to make the moves on... Yeah, I believe I said this last reaction video, but she's making the moves on on this boy she has a crush on in primary school and elementary school for you Americans. But her dad tells her, you know, you don't need to do it. You know, like the man woos the woman. You just need to look pretty and make subtle gestures. Which, of course, Adele doesn't like that idea. It makes her seem like just an object to be won. Though she doesn't phrase it like that, because she's just a kid, but she looks really distraught about it. But no, like clearly she wants to make the first move on this guy because she wants to be an active member of the relationship. Well, I say relationship, but yeah, they're just kids. It will probably just be like when I was in primary school and I used to randomly claim random girls as my quote-unquote girlfriend that were in my class. Okay, point is that none of the women in my family got any sexist messages. At the very least, or if they did, they must have got over it pretty quickly from when they watched it Snow White as a kid. And Cinderella for that matter, but I'll have more to say about that if I get around to that DisneyCember video. So, yeah, this video is probably like an hour long, so take care. I might get someone else to edit this because I really got to get on with that comic. It's been in the works for ages, and I really, really got to put all my time and energy into drawing up that comic, as well as helping out my friend Al with his comic, as well as doing the video where I go to Angus Road. Is it Road or Street? I can't remember, but yeah, I want to do the next DisneyCember today, if I can. Take my counsel, happy man. Whatever. Also, I know I probably should have said this at the start of the video, but it only just occurs to me now. If I sound a little bit sickly, I think I'm allergic to my sister's dogs. Because literally every single time I come here, I have some sort of... I get all congested and like sneezing and snotty and stuff. So yeah, I'll see you in the next reaction video, or the next video, whatever.